All right, let's make a formal introduction for our listener. Good morning, Gabe. My name is Claudio. I'm calling you from Washington, D.C., from the studios in Fairfax City. We're very humble and grateful that Gabe Treiyer accepted our invitation to our show. Gabe, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thank you very much. Thank you for having me, man. I mean, such an honor. Such an honor.
No, no problem. Thank you. So usually I start every conversation talking about the COVID, how the COVID, the pandemic, affected you, your family, as a touring musician during the pandemic, you couldn't go out that much. Some people believe in the vaccine, some people don't believe in the vaccine. Whatever. How you holding up? How affected your life?
Well, I think COVID had a very positive side, besides the disease, that for us musicians, because we never, I think, not even my generation or yours have to go through a world lockdown, or I mean, we never heard about it or something. And it was great because it really made us to reinvent ourselves as musicians, and musicians, I mean, I'm always been very technology wise and oriented, because obviously I had a technology background, but some musicians, never been aware of being on YouTube or working on social media or through the internet. And this really made many pros to made think about it, because if I don't know about your experience, but I think that they made us realize that if you're not on the internet, you're not on the business.
That's right.
Because obviously the tours are still happening. There always been tours, but we never been in something like this. So many guys had to reinvent themselves, in order to start making sessions, YouTube videos, whatever you want to call it, and it was very positive from that side, and I think, I mean, I did a COVID video, I think I told you about, previously, or that it was great. I mean, all this opportunity to be in touch with great musicians that weren't on tour. Everybody were at their house, and it was great because it, it gave us the opportunity to do something different and something that we weren't able to do before, I mean, and once everything started to open again, well, you asked me about the vaccine. Well, I mean, in this job, I know and I respect everyone's, thoughts about the vaccine, if they agree with them. But my job, this is me, this is my opinion. My job is to be out there. So when you're touring, you're exposed. You're exposed to be at airports, stage, crowds, everything. Sometimes you play it on big outdoor venues. Sometimes you play it on big indoor venues. So you need to be in touch with people all the time. It's different than many guys that probably in your job, you told me about that, your computer and technology related on your job. So it's different because you do homework and that's it. But traveling and being in touch with people, it's very different. So what are the tools that I have? Well, I need the shot? Well, yes, it's not only because the clients, the promoters, or everything requested, it's because of you also, and taking care of your family too. It's like, okay, what do I need to do? Because my job is this. I need to go out to the outside world, and being exposed. So do I need 1, 2, and a booster? Sure, why not? Because at the end of the day, it won't kill me. I mean, and well, I'm telling you something. 10 days ago, for the first time, my wife tested positive.
Wow.
Yeah, first time. It was like a flu, But I test myself 3 times being with her, and I was negative. We were supposed to have the best home test, available here. And otherwise, I don't know if I can be like this, and probably, I don't know, I could be in bed or something, but I mean, I don't know. But it helped me to go through it. And if everyone asked me, hey, are you vaccinated? Yes, I'm ready to go.
Yeah, good for you. Thank you. Let's talk about your upbringing. Were you born like in a musical family where music was important?
Oh,
How
no,
old were you
no,
when you
no, no.
began
Yeah.
taking piano lesson or guitar lesson?
Well, actually, like many others, I became the black sheep of the family.
Me included.
Yeah, there you go. So, yeah, I mean, music was part of my life since I was, I don't know, like forever. But I realized that at 4, I remember I'm from Argentina, and at 4, I remember being watching TV and a Kiss commercial from their album at the time, Dynasty, came out on the TV, and I was in shock. What is this? Yeah. What is this? I mean, it was a perfect combination. I mean, they look like superheroes with a guitar, I mean, the whole package for me, I was sold immediately. So I was like, I want to be like that, Was the first step. I had no idea how to play the guitar. Well, what's the first thing you grab? The tennis racket. Okay. That's right. So it didn't happen. I mean, I stayed like that until 11. I remember even my wife, it's like, were you crazy or something? I mean, my Christmas gift at the time, I was always asking, besides the Star Wars action figures, the Kiss cassettes that were releasing at the time. So every Christmas, I had a Kiss album. And of course, it wasn't like music like sometimes, in the late 70s. It was pretty heavy during the 80s. And being 8, 9, 10-year-old listening to that kind of music, it kind of forged, your taste and your musical experience. And I remember that I was watching, well, you will remember something that many TV channels made at the time, that was broadcasting both at the same time, radio and TV. They broadcasted the concerts, at the same time. So you were able to listen it on the radio, and on TV. And they aired what they were playing, Dire Straits' Alchemy.
Yeah, wow.
And when I heard that version of Sultans of Swing, the 10-minute version, I was floored. I was like, wow, man. I mean, what is this? And I remember that the day after that, I told my dad, I want a guitar. And my dad was like, this is the first time you asked for a nonsense. So let's go and buy it. And I couldn't even play a note, I started taking lessons and all that stuff. And I remember my dad, I realized then that he was a frustrated musician, but I remember my dad being on the couch with my guitar and doing just this, not playing anything, but he was happy just to do, to be able to do that. So, and after that, I started playing guitars, a couple of, family issues. I mean, when I was 13, my dad passed away. So imagine how is that at that early age, entering the teenage year, that what is the best thing you can do? Focus in music. So after that, that's why I say, and I'm saying this not to be on a downside, because it was pretty much what forged me as my attitude to being towards music all the time. So after that, because of the growth spurt, I had to, the doctor had to put 2 nails on my hip. So I wasn't able to walk during 6 months. At 13 years old, what's the only thing you can do? This and listen to radio, right? So I was playing this 24/7, practicing and all that stuff. So by the time I became 15, I was already playing in bands. And of course, and I'm saying this, with the best of intention, but I was, of course, a couple of steps ahead of my friends playing guitar, because obviously I had the chance to focus,
6 months straight
24/7 on this, and I remember that I was reading a Steve Vai interview at the time. Passion and Warfare came in. I mean, it was like something totally new for any. I mean, remember, 13 years old, right? So it opened my mind in incredible ways, and I read an interview that he was like clocking 8 hours a day, playing, practicing. And I was like, if I want to be like that, I need to practice that. Of course, high school went to hell. Right. So I was clocking. I remember my friends coming, hey, would you like to play football or soccer for American? Do you want to? No, I have 3 hours left of practice. Oh, fuck off, and I kept playing this, doing this, because that's what I want to do.
Sure.
And of course, you have to deal with, how do you explain your mom that you want to be a musician and you want to play with all the guys you have on the posters on your wall when you're a teenager in Argentina? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. And what they say? What your mom? Well, but eventually, right? Eventually, you finished high school, right? You were 17, 18.
Eventually, I quit high school. I came back to high school because actually a friend at the time, he was my best friend at the time. He had a studio, and I was, spending more time there than at home, learning. I was pretty immersed in all the recording process and all the stuff. And he was like, look, I'm telling you something. You don't finish high school. If you don't go back to high school, you never put a foot here anymore.
Wow.
And because of that, that's it. And I finished high school, and then I was free.
Sure.
Then I was free. So obviously I started to form in bands. I changed my style. And I always had in mind, because I'm a very mind open guy, my taste, and I always wanted to be a session player. So being able to play different kind of music, with all the guys. So I started to form bands. That's why I came in the first time to United States, started playing in cover bands and all that stuff. And it was great. It was great. But I came back to Argentina, and I was kind of disenchanted with the whole scene. I was tired of that pay to play kind of thing, that I was like, no, dealing with bands. And that's why I started, because I always loved electronic music. And that's why I started to do some electronic music, play synthesizers and all that stuff, creating loops. And it was great. I mean, it wasn't just playing a button. I was creating my own stuff in there. So with the time, I had this idea of calling, because I heard that song on the radio. I called the lead singer from Loves Jezebel, without having any contact or previous contact before. I was like totally reckless on, hey, I would like to do a version of your song. What will I expect from such a statement? I mean, I probably was like, well, you can go to hell. I don't know, something like that. And the guy, Michael, was like, yeah, man, I'd be delighted. I was floored, like, wow. So from that moment on, I have a saying, you always have a no. Go for a yes.
Of course.
Right?
That's right.
My career, and that's why my professional career started. It was an email away, from everything. You're always an email away from everything.
That's right. Yeah. Were you, at the time when you were in Argentina, I mean, were you listening to, besides the American bands? I want to know what bands in Latin America you listening was.
Well, at the time,
Charlie Garcia, Soda Stereo,
it was a different generation. It was a different generation, obviously old Ceru Girán, Charlie Garcia, and all those guys. I grew up in the 80s, so I know, but how do you say this? I mean, I think that at that period of my life, I remember Soda Stereo, and my favorite album from them is Dynamo, the more experimental. And I always loved to death Gustavo Cerati because not only he was a great writer, songwriter, composer, singer, and the whole package, on the guitar, the guy was always experimenting with effects, and he came from the same school that I can do. So it was like Andy Summers, The Edge, and all that, using effects on the guitar and not just ripping off, and applying all that to songs. And that's why I think that Gustavo Cerati is the greatest musician in the whole of Latin America. No disrespect for anyone, but this is my opinion. And obviously, after he passed away, every time someone released some of his music, it sells like, he were alive. I mean, it's the same, and I don't think that doesn't happen with any other artist in Latin America. Anyway, I remember at the time, of course, on the radio, you had Maná, you have Aguares and Lale or some, but I was never really much of a fan, of all those bands, except for Gustavo Cerati and Soda Stereo. And at the time I was I started making electronic music. Gustavo came with Bocanada, which was the perfect blend. I mean, Bocanada for me is at the same level in my life, at the same level that David Bowie's Erling, because that was a perfect marriage of electronic music and electric guitars.
Yeah.
So for me, it was I love Bocanada because it represents a moment in my life that I was trying to do the same. And I was like, oh, this guy is doing that. And he's becoming massive, and that's great. That's great. Talking about Bowie, I'm working with the current with my guitars from 10 years now. I play with Rips Gabriel's model, which is Rips Gabriel's, Tin Machine, David Bowie's guitar player for 10 years, and now he's in The Cure. And when we met in Buenos Aires, he introduced me to the company. So, he was like, okay, you come from Rips, it's okay. So I had a pretty good recommendation from them.
Feel free to mention the guitar you haven't. All right, show it.
What, sorry?
Yeah, tell the story about the guitar. That's important.
Oh, about this guitar. Okay, so many guys can recognize this guitar, like Brian May's guitar, right?
Yeah.
So when I met Brian, I was invited to their show in Buenos Aires in 2015. We kept in touch, and Brian has a inner circle of friends that each year he gives guitars to some of those persons. I've been in touch with the head of the company for quite some time, and I was like, hey man, is there any way I can be, jump the kid, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, well, let me know, let me see what I can do. And okay, thank you. And some 2 years later, I was coming back from Oklahoma playing with Fran Cosmo, and while waiting at the airport, I got the email that, hey, your guitar is coming, in a couple of weeks. So it's
there is.
signed by Brian May, personalized by him. And as a huge Queen fan, you should realize what this means to me, right?
That's for you, man. Great fan. Have you been using that one, or you keep it?
Well, actually,
or you prefer to keep it?
I took this one on a couple of home gigs here, pretty close, because with another act that when I'm not on tour or doing it, we got with another violin player that lives here, pretty renowned violin player. We have a duo called Strings on Fire, which we play the instrumental songs. He sometimes he's in violin and I play the guitar, and we play the songs that we love, and we do like a 12-minute Queen medley, and that's where this
You
guitar
bring it.
comes in for special events only.
Okay. Yeah, you gotta be careful.
One of my main ones, with the time became signed by Steve Hackett, Adrian Belew, Rips Gabriels, Steve Rothery from Marillion, Andy Summers, and all those guys. So that's my number one. That sometimes I'm taking on tours, sometimes I don't. Mainly because of the signatures in there. But it's like it was my number one guitar for many, many years and many tours. It was like, and I was actually my number one. Now, I was in Phoenix with Fran Cosmo, the former lead singer from Boston, and on the same bill there were Jefferson Starship and Grand Funk Railroad. So we've been playing at this huge outdoor venue, and funnily enough, Bruce Kulick from Kiss, the guitar player for Kiss during almost 15 years during the 80s and 90s, plays now in Grand Funk. And because we made this COVID video, the pandemic video, we never met in person, but we just met on the backstage of that festival. So I was like, hey, Bruce, I gave him my CD and all that stuff. And hey, will you sign my guitar? Yeah, of course. I got, I'm a huge Kiss fan. So for me, it was such an honor, it's like, it's not only for me. All this stuff will pay for my daughter's college.
That's right. Eventually, you understand. So let's go. So you end up coming to the United States, and then you was your album Unsung Hero was a self-release, and feel free to elaborate on the process, how difficult it was to put it together, and so forth.
Well, actually, that album came during a strange period of my life. I mean, strange because at the time I think I was either on tour or I was living outside Buenos Aires at the time. But during that period, I moved from United States to Argentina to Chile, came back and blah, blah, blah. And I always had my computer, and audio interface. And I was, on some time off, I was like, well, I want to do an album and I don't have many people, around. So I'll try to start writing myself and recording myself, because thankfully I play keyboards and bass guitars. I do programming, and kind of do it all, because not from an ego point of view. It's because I don't want to depend on anyone to do something, on a recording. If I need to play a bass, I play it. If I need to play a keyboard, I play it, and that's it. Then if I need another person that plays much more than me, or I want for a specific thing, that's different. I call someone and that's it. But for that album, it was like, it was the opposite than many guitar players, because I always been a songwriter. So I always wrote songs, because personally, I think that every great band, they weren't famous because of the guitar solo, the keyboard solo, or anything, because they had all that on great songs.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. So that's why the Beatles are, timeless, or the Stones, or Yes, or Genesis, or whoever you want to name it. Okay. So, and for me, the difficult thing, because I'm not a singer, at least not a lead singer, and I was like, well, I'll try to do something that I never did, an instrumental album. And I was like, this is kind of difficult, because obviously when you have lyrics, you have something to say. But what do you say on the guitar? What do you say on the guitar? So I don't want to be just a guy that looks like a jam session, like jamming licks. So no, I just want a regular song with a melody line and saying something with the guitar. And that's what I try to do. So then I called some friends at the time, like David Palau from Spain, Tommy Denander from Sweden, which we were touring at the time with Bobby Kimball, the lead singer from TOTO. And Tommy is like the European Steve Lukather. I mean, the guy played with everyone, about 5,000 albums. And nowadays, the last thing he did was playing, he co-wrote and co-produced the last 2 or 3 Alice Cooper's albums, along with Bob Ezrin and some, big names. He always say that was what he said like, a year ago, like, hey, I even played a chord on a Deep Purple album.
Yeah.
On the Infinite album, they were with Bob Ezrin, who produced that album, and he was on the studio with him. And Roger Glover came in to the studio, and he was listening to a mix, and he was like, "There's a missing chord here." Where? Here, I think it was a chorus or verse or something. It was like, "There's a missing chord here." And Roger said, "Well, Bob told me that you're a great guitar player. Can you play that chord?" So he just recorded one chord. That's it. And he was credited at Lost Chord on the album. And he was like, "Hey, I play with Deep Purple, right? One chord."
Wow, what amazing. How you
So yeah, I mean, that album came out, out of not having too much people around. And thankfully technology, was great, because I was able to call some friends to be on the album, and with the internet was kind of easy.
Sure. And then your second album, I was able to listen to it last night, The Scars, A Journey Through a Lifetime. And you play with a lot of, guitar legends as guests, Feel free to elaborate how you contact them and, how you put it together. And the end product, you told me that you didn't like it that much, so you end up remastering and arrange it to your tasting. And feel free to elaborate on that, because that's an important album.
Well, actually, that album was something that it was an extension of a period of my life that I was playing with some of those guys, 2014, I remember Marillion went to Buenos Aires, and I wrote Steve Brother, because I've always been a Marillion fan. I wrote to Steve, "Hey man, I'm this guy, blah 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 blah," and I've always been a huge fan of the band. So if there are any chance to meet you, sure, man, come to the show. We meet at backstage, blah, 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 blah. So I came to the backstage and I met Steve, one of the sweetest guys that I ever met. So we became very, very good friends with the time. And he invited me to have a drink. And I remember I was with a friend of mine that he had to wake up early in the morning. I was like, "Steve, thank you so much. I cannot make it, but next one for sure." And I remember we kept in touch, changing emails and blah, blah, blah. And a couple of months later, that was in May of 2014. Around October, he wrote me something like, "Hey, are you going to be on January in Buenos Aires?" I was like, "I think so. Yeah, why?" "I'll let you know later." Okay. And by December, he called me and was like, "Hey, I'm going to Buenos Aires to do another business." He was doing an app for his photograph books. He's a great photographer as well, and there was a book collecting pictures from the early beginnings of Marillion to the very last tour. And it was postcards from the road. And he came to Buenos Aires and he was like, "Why don't you set up a show and so we can play together?" And it's such a shame that if I go there, people don't see me play. So,
yeah.
And I was like, "Great." I didn't have a band at the time. That's why the Gabe Treiyer band came to life. I had to set up a band, and we played. I mean, in January in Buenos Aires, it's summer high season, so no one was in the city. No one was in the city. So when it was announced, I remember that, of course, Marillion fans and many prog rock fans are hardcore fans, right? So many canceled their vacations, many returned earlier from the vacation or delayed the vacation because of the show, and because they never been able to see Steve playing on a little club. I mean, we played for, I mean, it was packed, sold out, but it was like 150 guys, you know?
Wow.
And I, of course, because at the time I was used to, at the time I was playing, you know, with big names. So I was used to being with these guys and being with Steve. But I remember been drinking something, you know, at the entrance door at the club, and the people were entering the bar, and when they saw Steve, they were like, jaw dropped. Like Steve was there. I mean, they were used to see Steve, you know, on big theaters or arenas or something, but and Steve talking with everyone, and they were like, I mean, it was like a dream-like experience for many of these guys. And from that moment, we became good friends with Steve. He decided to launch a South American label, you know, because many of Marillion and his solo albums weren't released there, and it was easier. I mean, it was a way to make it easier for fans to not spend a fortune trying to get him from England or Europe or whatever. And we released a couple of songs, a couple of albums, and his latest solo album at the time, which is a great album. I strongly recommend it because he has Steve Hackett and Steve Wilson playing in there, but it's instrumental and very atmospheric. I mean, it's awesome. An awesome album that I listen to this day. And we, for the launch of the label, we set up a couple of shows, you know, with the local band Bad Dreams. So, and with Steve, I start becoming a kind of known in the prog scene. Of course, I was playing with Bobby Kimball from TOTO, which, you know, of course, many fans loved. And with this, and then I start, thanks to Steve, because he's pretty close friends with Steve Hackett. I met Steve Hackett and we became friends. We've been in touch and blah, 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 blah. One thing led to another. And I was like, okay, I've always been a prog rock fan and I'm playing with these guys. I'm going to do a prog rock album. And I was like, why not? I mean, I always loved that. And I was like, I'll do it. But I always had this idea in my mind. I always loved The Wall, one of my favorite prog albums. You know, many people don't consider Pink Floyd prog, but I mean, The Wall, it's, you like it or not, whether you like it or not, one of the greatest albums of all time. And that idea of telling the story of my life, you know, in an album. Of course, when you are 20 or 25, what the hell are you going to say? I broke up with my girlfriend. That's it. Your life was that. You know, that's it. So after at the time I was 42, I've been through, you know, a divorce and many things in my life as a musician, you know, and many experiences that I was like, and of course, by the time I formed a new family with my current wife, so you've been through a lot of stuff, you know, and I was like, this is the right moment to do it. And it's harder because I wasn't in a band, so I was the only one, you know, writing stuff. So when you do something like that, it's like, okay, the music, which order? What are you going to say on this? What are you going to say on that? How do you put everything together? And I decided to write a script, you know, chapter 1, 2, and 3. And that made it, I mean, that made things a lot easier because you started at the beginning when on the album, I talk about my childhood, you know. The second part, it's when chaos come,